Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you may look down and see a little link down there. You can actually join the conversation and be part of it if you'd like. If you are on in Zoom, you're probably sitting in the attendees, and you see panelists here. You're trying to figure out, how do the attendees become panelists? Well, the way you do it is you get in early. So basically, what you want to do is start at we start at 6 o'clock. I'm not going to promise anything between 6 and 6:30. We were talking about rock and roll today, I think. But last week we were talking about drywall. You just have no idea what we're going to be talking about. So 6 to 6:30 is probably, it's a lot of fun. It's the original hour that we had when we first started this. Between 6:30 and 6:40, we actually, and by the way, I'm just going to stop for a second. Chris, it's a real distraction. If you're on another call, just so you guys know, I'm going to put you in attendees. So I can't, it's super distracting for me to have people talking. So literally you're either on the panel or you're not on the panel, but you can't do anything else. So if you're in the panel, I have someone moving while I'm talking here. So anyway, so what was I saying? Oh, so attendees. So between 6:30 and 6:40, we're going to hand out the Discord link. Discord link is where 600 of us are sitting there talking and chatting amongst ourselves between these things. At 6:40, we start mic checks. Once you see us doing mic checks, that's it. The room is full. So that's what we're going to have for today. So 6:40. Now at 7 o'clock, we start our Q&A. And so the thing about it is there's split responsibilities here. The responsibility of the panel is to discuss your questions. Now, we don't have a certain superpower that you have as an attendee. We can only discuss the questions. We can't ask the questions. We don't have access to the Q&A, but you do. So down below, you have a Q&A section. You can actually ask questions there. You can vote on questions, and really your vote matters. So if you're looking, there's over 200 people here. There's only a handful of questions and only a handful of votes. You need to pick it up. If you're an attendee, you need to pick up the pace a little bit, do your part, ask questions, and then vote on those questions. So if you're not going to ask a question, look for questions that you like, move them up, and really be part of that conversation. The second hour, so the first hour, 7 to 8, is just us talking about these questions, answering those questions. The second hour, the 8 to 9, basically we are now in a subject. Monday, we were going to make visual effects, but I think we're actually going to make it the wild card. Like we put anything in Monday. So Monday is going to be the wild card day. Tuesday is audio. Wednesday is cameras. Thursday is a special guest. Friday is education. Saturday is education. We've added education as a second hour on Saturday because it's so popular on Friday, we can't even get through the questions. And so we'll be answering questions if you're an educator on Friday and Saturday. Sunday is the relaxed day where we, it's a much more laid back, but 2 hours of Q&A. This Tuesday, today, we've got Greg Curda. Greg is here, and Greg is going to be talking about Foley. Greg has been a Foley artist for many years, and he's going to discuss what it is and how it works and how he got into it and all those things just in about an hour. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about cameras. Now, we were going to have a general discussion about cameras with Chris Summers, but we were able to get someone from Blackmagic to actually come and talk about the 12K with us. So head of U.S. sales is going to be here with us to discuss the Blackmagic 12K and to answer our questions and question some of our answers. Go study the Blackmagic 12K because we have someone from Blackmagic in the pit with us tomorrow to talk about it. Then on Thursday we've got Renee Ritchie. He's an old friend of mine, and he is he's amazing. Like he obviously on MacBreak, but a blogger, started his own, I don't even know how he did it. He starts his own YouTube thing again from scratch and already builds it up to 70,000 or more followers, or 100,000 or something like that. So how does he do that? Well, we're gonna discuss it. Think about those questions for him on Thursday, and again, Friday and Saturday are gonna be opened for Q&A, and then Saturday is the long day. We talk about Unreal Engine at 9 with Nick Jushishin from Drexel. We're going to talk about Final Cut with Steve Bays, the former senior product manager for Final Cut. And so we're going to be talking about Final Cut there, and we're going to talk about vMix with Leland Best. So those are all the things that are coming up. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Chris. And what do we got, Chris?
I'm only seeing 3 questions. What do you see?
I'm only seeing 3 questions, and I just want the attendees to know
that we're going to have a
that
nice long discussion about these.
that we're going to talk a lot because we're going to be stretching it out. In broadcast, if you're on air and they don't have anything for you to go to, you'll see some person going like this. So you're gonna see us do this if you don't ask more questions. So anyway, so think of those questions and figure it out. All right, go ahead, Chris.
A good number of votes, however, 12 votes on Collins. While we seem to have found a suitable cheap kit mic for client delivery in the Pyle units, which we were talking about before the show, we might want to talk about that. It may be worth exploring similarly priced IEMs, in-ear monitors. Thoughts from the group?
So they're IEMs or they're IFBs. So these are interruptible foldbacks. So those are this is what we call them, and generally they're these little earpieces. And so I just want to set the what we're talking about here. This is an auto IEM, an ear monitor, and this is about $50 or $60, I think. But this is the one that we usually often send out. There's other ones that are more like this. This is a Ear Hero, which is more expensive. We're not getting into the cheap ones yet. I had the one that I'm using here around here somewhere, but I put it down. So that's what we're talking about to kind of level set, is something that's going to go into typically one ear that's going, and a lot of us are wearing them. It just makes it so that we can have it closed without it showing up, so it's kind of hidden. And when you're in broadcast, everybody has one. So, when all the hosts have those so that they can part of that. Go ahead, Mickey, you were going to say something there.
Yeah, I was just wondering what Colin means by cheap. Like, is cheap $100? Is cheap? Like...
I figured something akin to the price point of the Pyles. I mean, the $10 is a little bit excessive, but I figured $40 or under was the way I was shooting.
Okay.
Alex had identified the $50 item, and that's certainly worth considering. But if we can do better,
yep. Go ahead, Jeff, and then Chris, and then back to Mickey.
I love the Panasonic earbuds, and these you can get for under $10, or if you spend $13, you get a TRRS with the mic compatible for your phone or computer.
That's great. And Chris, and then do you just use one ear, or do you use both ears? I guess you can choose, right?
I've got both ears right now. You can choose.
Right.
And you're wearing them now. Interesting.
I'm wearing the black.
I was going to keep in mind that for the longest time, Sky used those Skull Candy headsets. And I think that when it comes to just the little, something to listen to music on, you're going to have it might be okay. And yeah, you could use one wire. Could you just cut one wire off? Would that screw it up electronically to get rid of that extra dangling bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people would leave it on just so you just hang it down your back. Because the main thing is, if you're going to hang it, the one thing to think about that's probably as important as the extension cable. So what makes this work, makes a lot of these headphones work and run up your back is just buying I have this one's like a metal braided, because I like braided cables. And so, but this is a braided extension cable for my headset. And it just gives me an extra 3 feet, and that's enough to comfortably move it up my back and have a little bit of slack to work on it. That's the big thing, is getting an extension. You can use almost any wired headphones at that point. Obviously, the Apple ones are not great because they're white. I mean, if you're trying to be low profile, it's nice to have something that's a darker color, and then these run up over your ear. You can run a lot of these up over your ear. I saw Jeff is running up straight up into his ear, but kind of tucking it in the back is kind of the key. Jeffrey?
I did a review about 6 months ago for 3 different ones on Amazon. First one is the CC8 C10, which is about $40. The basins, that was a triple driver. This is a dual driver. The basins, and then finally a lot of people love this one, the KZZ SR. And the best part about these is that you can actually separate them from the earbuds. So if you just want one in, you just leave the other one dangle. And then you can also get like Bluetooth connections for these, and even use like the Sony versions, as long as you have the right either 2-pin in or single pin in connection.
Yep. Mickey, go ahead.
Yeah, if you're willing to go the semi-disposable route, you could buy walkie-talkie earpieces from AliExpress and like 50 or 100 packs, and that's what I usually do. And it ends up being like anywhere from $2 to $5 each.
Now the question there is that they are those dual pin, or are they actually just headset mics? Are
That's
they
that's the
TRS?
thing. I just snip them off and just quickly put on a mini jack.
Oh, so you just rewire them.
Yeah.
you
So
get 'em.
I have bags of these for different, like this is for Kenwoods, this is for Motorola's, and if I need them for mini jacks, I just snip them off and
Oh, that's great.
rewire.
That's great. Bill and then Jason.
So I, for the longest time on the show here, used a thing off of Amazon that was $20 called a Far End Gear Short Bud, 22-inch cord. They do collapse stereo into mono. So if you're using one ear, you get both sides of any stereo feed, and they work fine. The only issue was that out in the voice booth, it was so humid out there that after these long 2 and 3 hour sessions, and particularly on Saturday, I'd start getting little itching problems in my ear because there was no airflow at all. That's why I moved to the in-ear monitors for this, but they worked fine. And at $20, you can't beat them.
Jason and then Sky.
So I lost my custom earpieces on stage when I was shooting a show, and I got these one year at Amazon Prime. They're $40. The MEE Audio M6. What I like about them is, first, they're clear, but more importantly, they sound fantastic. I mean, I'm wearing them right now, and yeah, no complaints for $40.
Okay, Sky and then Victor, but let's go quick because now everyone's gotten questions in there. We're going to start accelerating. Go ahead,
Awesome.
Sky.
The gel piece is very handy for me because it's just softer. I know some people like the hard, but also to make sure that you have the TSR. When Jeff was showing that extension cable, make sure that it has the. Go ahead, Alex.
No, you're right. TRS, the TRS,
TRS,
yeah. But yeah, TRS is important. Keep track of it because sometimes if you mismatch those, you end up with not anything. So if you have TS going into TRS or TRS going into TS, they should work, but they don't always, and so you have to be careful.
Colin, the definition of that is tip, ring,
tip, sleeve, yeah.
Sleeve. Thank you.
Yeah, it's or a stereo headphone jack. If you're talking to someone who doesn't know what a TRS is, use a stereo headphone jack, not mono. Victor, real quick.
With microphone.
Real quick, the MEE M6, I just put a link up for the 2018 version, $12. And it is what I'm wearing as well. They sound great.
Awesome. All right. We beat that one right into the ground. So all right, next
now
question.
We have a bunch more questions. So Roger Miles says, what is a good monitor/TV switch to manage 4 HDMI inputs with audio? It should be network managed and support a quad display as well as switch to the individual displays. Ooh, there's a landmine.
Yeah, like we're all like, I mean, there's definitely 4 HDMI inputs.
Don't some of the big...
I mean, those are receivers. I mean, we have receivers that do all of that. But part of it is the quad display. So you're talking about using you're a multi-view as well. So you want to do a multi-view of the images, or you want to be able to switch to each one. Now, Blackmagic, of course, makes something that would do that with SDI, but not necessarily HDMI. Jason and then Mike.
The closest I can think of, other than a standard like just junky monoprice thing, would be the Decimator, Demon 4. But that's nothing checks all those boxes that I know of.
Network managed. Yeah.
Network managed, yeah. That's the. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, okay. Network managed blows out of the box, but I would just say that you need, get a bunch of splitter cables, and you run your quad display, split it from the quad display into a 4-port switcher. You're going to have a lot of cables laying around.
Yeah, but go ahead, Tucker.
Company called Lightware that we use on the kind of high end of matrix switching for that sort of thing. Like we'll use it inbound or outbound from watch out systems and things like that. And I believe they're definitely network controlled. They're definitely matrices, so you can shift things where you want them to go. As far as multi-view, I believe they have one that's multi-view, but typically what I would wind up doing is a matrix that handles the matrixing, and then a multi-view that's a output from the matrix, and one of the presets from the matrix would feed the multi-view, if that makes sense.
And I will say, you could almost do it with a when you said that, I realized you could almost do it with a ATEM Mini. We can't. It's network controlled. It's got 4 HDMI ins. It's got an HDMI out. The Pro would give you a multi-view. It wouldn't. I don't know if it'd do 4 up, but it would be very close. Jeffrey.
I was just going to suggest that with the Mini, but the other thing is you could give NDI a try, and then you don't have all those cables running around. You just need to connect in something like a Connect that would go to a computer, and that's network manageable.
Andrew and then Dave, try to keep it quick. We're going to move on.
I just found an LG monitor that's a 4K monitor, 43-inch, that has 4 inputs, and you can also do like multi-view display.
Wow, how much is that?
Here it's 1,000 Canadian on
That's the one that Jeff recommended. You know,
yeah, that's great. Yeah. That's great. Dave?
Rose Electronics, they make KVM switches that I've used for watch-out systems in the past.
And who makes that again?
Rose.com, Rose Electronics, they're rack mount, and they do a quad split. No.
That's great. All right, next question.
Tim McKean says, can you talk about working with talent and getting people who are not used to being on stage or camera to be more comfortable and authentic?
Practice. So part of it's guidance, but so much of it is just practice and getting them up on stage, especially if they haven't done it before. I do like to, I know, and there's other people here who have more experience than I do, but when I'm working with folks, I want to get them into a room, first of all, that there's nobody else there, so they can just kind of get used to it. People get really, especially when they haven't done this before, get really self-conscious about what they're doing and how they look and everything else. And you want to get them kind of, part of it is them knowing their content really well. The more they know their content, how they're going to say it, or they just know about it, the more comfortable they're going to be on stage. When they're still trying to remember their lines and on stage at the same time, it's a very stressful event. So that's it. And then trying to give them some guidance of the whole stuff I talked about before the show, which is finding marks and standing still and doing those kinds of things. And it just really depends on the size of the event. On some of the events that we work on, speakers start 6 to 8 weeks out, working on whatever they're going to present for 5 minutes. And for other ones, they're walking up and just starting to talk. And so you just have to, you kind of balance those things. But the biggest thing is the more they do it and the more they get exposed to it. We've done some where we bring mock audiences in so that they have to sit in front of, I mean, this is for a bunch of speakers, but of 100 people in there. So they get used to having a bunch of people and all the idiosyncrasies that happen there, kind of go through that. Bill, then Jason, then Sky, then Chris, but try to do 15 seconds each. We're just going to try to bounce this stuff.
Okay, on the not so much on stage, but on camera things, one thing is to just try to engage the person you're interviewing with outside of things. Tell them the camera's off, try to engage them in conversation, and then have a hand signal for your camera operator so they don't really know, if you keep them engaged, that they're on camera. And sometimes you can transition into them being much more natural.
Jason?
Stage and camera are in many ways different. I agree that absolutely there's no substitute for practice, but you need to remember that the camera will absolutely exaggerate any motion, whereas the stage almost has to be more, more out there and more believed and emphasized. So I'd say, in one sentence, remind people that they're experts and qualified to do something, and then remember your scope.
Yeah, and the other thing to remember is that probably for the next 6 months to a year, maybe 18 months, the biggest thing we're getting them used to is cameras, and less of people. So it's that they're speaking in front of folks and how they get comfortable in that environment. Go ahead, Sky.
Because I work with volunteers, I tell people that one eyeball is one person that is a friend of theirs, and that they are talking to June Elvig, and it's a conversation. You're only having a conversation with one person.
Oftentimes as a speaker, I'll look at people who are, I try to pay attention to everyone, but especially people that are excited about the content, I'll tend to focus on them as I'm doing it because it just helps me stay up. I do pay attention to everyone. I pay a lot of attention to blink rate. So if they start blinking really slow, then I tell a joke. So, because it just means that there's too much information. Everyone needs to rest. If one person's doing it, it's one thing, but if everybody's doing it, you'll see that there's kind of this, everyone's starting to get a little groggy. It usually means that either I'm being boring or I'm saying too much information at one time, and I just take a break. And one of these little stories that I tell there to wake them back up again, or give them a refresher, let their sponge open back up again. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say two different things, not necessarily great ideas, just things I've done. For camera, I've put stuffed animals above the lens, talk to the bunny. For stage, or not stage, but on our TV show, people would come in and overly pitch their product. And I would always just say, look, I want you to sit here and talk to the host and imagine you're standing in your garage sharing a beer. Just tell them about the cool stuff you're working on. Be yourself. You're the expert.
Next question.
David Guzman says, Colin went to Windows so he could use Unreal since the Mac doesn't recognize NDI, ? Is this true? Mac not suitable for Unreal?
I wouldn't say that it's not suitable for Unreal. It does everything in Unreal that you'd want Unreal to do. The issue is the NDI plugin for Unreal is not compiled for Mac, and their binary plugin format is not cross-platform yet. I'm sure they'll fix that at some point. Speaking of not cross-platform, I discovered the same problem with the Stream Deck binary plugins, not cross-platform.
Interesting. Cool. All right, next question.
Jeffrey says, we've mentioned that using a phantom HDMI dongle to get a second window for Zoom when you only have one monitor. But how do you move that window onto your screen when you can't see it? I'm on a Mac. So you're saying it puts it somewhere out in the ether?
Go ahead, Phil.
It's an interesting problem because I hadn't thought about that because I got two monitors, but I think you could do a mirror display and it would put everything on one screen, or you could also hit the expose thing, I think. Couldn't that? I'm just guessing.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah,
I think
expose will do it.
I think Mac, when you're in a dual display mode, it has both mirror and gather displays, and I think that'll bring them both onto a single.
Jason, you were going to say?
Yeah, so expose will do it, and then there's a keystroke which is escaping me. I want to say it's just command Y or command F that will bring whatever it is and maximize it.
Yep. And then Tucker,
are you interested in knowing how to do it for Windows, or should I skip that?
No, go ahead.
On Windows, and what we wind up doing is if you for Zoom specifically, Alt F is to make it full screen. So you Alt F, like basically you select the application at the start menu or on the bar at the bottom, and Alt F to make it not full screen, and then use hold the Windows key down and hit your arrows, and it will pop that screen along your displays, and you can pull it back to yourself.
That's great. Next question.
Our own Grant Whitehead, recently off his big giant gig, says he's looking for a streaming CDN platform for an audience that is all in China.
So the best CDN that I found to work in China is called Asia Sat 5. So that is the satellite that sits over top of Asia, and if you put a signal up there, it will cover the whole part of that continent. And the reason that's interesting is that a lot of people will pick it up from there. And so generally, when we partnered with what we work on there, it's really hard. I would say almost impossible for you to stream from the outside into China, at least from an official status. There's ways to hack into it, but if you're doing a real event and you're going to go into China, you need a Chinese partner, and they need to be, approved by the government. I mean, otherwise there's all kinds of trouble, that comes out of that starts with them blocking your event in the middle of the event and ends with a denial of service attack from Chinese programmers. So, there's a whole bunch of bad things that happen if you don't partner properly inside of China. I have a lot of experience in this area. So what the easiest thing to do is you got to find partners that'll rebroadcast there. Now you can send that can be sent with an RTMP. We've done RTMP HLS, but the other way that we've done it, the easiest way to do it is you put it up on AsiaSat 5, and that means they can pull it down. A lot of Indian broadcasters, Indian streamers, Chinese streamers will all have some little dish that they can pull stuff down from AsiaSat 5. If you put it up encrypted, you can make sure that only they have it. But you could also put it up unencrypted. It means everybody has it. And you would be, if you have something remotely interesting, obviously if you're having a closed event in China, then encrypt it and put it up. I think that there are some licensing issues with encrypted, so in China. But if you put it up unencrypted, it means everybody can have it in Asia. And you'd be surprised at how many people will pull it down and where it'll show up. In India, especially if you're in a slow time in the news, you'll end up in slow. If it's a slow day and you throw something up on AsiaSat 5, you'll reach 100 million people by accident. So it's India is an incredible scale, and without some of the restrictions that are there. So anyway, but that's been the most successful for me. Go ahead, Jason.
Just a procedural question. Independently of the CDN, Alex, do you know if Weibo just supports direct, live streaming in the same way that Facebook does? If I remember correctly, it does.
I don't know if we can do it from the exterior. I mean, you might be able to do it internally, but I don't. Again, we've never had any event run successfully for the length of the event by without a local partner that's going to rebroadcast it. We've tried.
Well,
it's gone from it's been somewhat inconvenient to horrible. Has been our experience. Yeah, go ahead.
I say that because my ex-girlfriend was a Chinese national and brought her phone with her Chinese Weibo account over, and she would routinely stream.
That may be it, but if she's got a phone that's registered in China, that might be an entirely different situation than what we're talking about, which is an RTMP out, not an API based, not registered to a Chinese phone. Those are a bunch of different variables there. So I think that would be probably what's going on there. And it is a big country, and you get an enormous, it is worth partnering with Chinese partners to do some of the bigger events that we've worked on for larger brands. They definitely go in do that. I'll just tell you one that you don't need to know right now, but if you want to stream to VK, which is the Facebook in Russia, the only place that I know of to do that is Restream. Restream.io. Restream.io will restream to VK. It's another thing that I'll just save you a lot of time. It took me a long time to figure that out.
You will never get pulled down from VK. Yeah. I've never seen anything banned.
It's so funny. It's like Facebook without everything. It's just super. Well, if you go to VK, it's everything is super austere. It's very Russian, just very austere. Everything's austere in that thing. So it's anyway. Next question.
The next question is, what are some good audio mixers for a newbie?
Go ahead, Colin.
The Yamaha AGO6 was recommended to me by an audiophile that I have great respect for, and I, at that time, this is 5 years ago, knowing nothing about audio, have been very, very happy with it. It goes for about 150 maybe. It's a 3-channel XLR in. It's got an 1/8-inch jack in also for channel 1 for mic, and it's really quite nice.
Greg, and then Tucker, and then Jason.
I think it really depends on what you're going to use it for, first of all. Secondly, the most important thing on any mixer is the quality of the preamps. Everything else is just is fluff. So one of the interesting things about Behringer is they're now starting to load all of their mixers with those Midas preamps, or the Midas design preamps anyway. And they're really good. All the Yamaha preamps are really good. I think if you just try to find the ones with the best preamps and then scale it to what you need, do you need effects? Do you not need effects? That kind of stuff.
Good, Tucker, and then Jason.
Yeah, the kind of medium end, not super low end option that I recommend to literally anybody that asks me this question is the Allen Heath Z series. They're small form factor, great preamps, great quality. They have good USB connectivity. It's just a fantastic device. Allen Heath Z.
He took my answer. That's exactly what I was going to say. The Z series is absolutely spectacular.
And then Mickey.
Yeah, I have to third that. The Z series, even the ones with the built-in effects, the Z effects, I think they call it, the effects are pretty decent. They're reverbs and delays. If you're mixing music, they're pretty decent for the price.
And I think the one thing you want to think about is when you're saying you're a newbie, are you a newbie that just wants it to work, or are you a newbie that wants to get better? Do you want to grow into it? So when we had this question a while ago, and there was someone says, I've got a lot of time, I'm retired, I'm trying to figure this stuff out. And I said an X32 because I was kind of like, if you've got a lot of time and you want to learn something, you want to keep yourself busy for the next couple months or years, you can do a lot of growing inside of an X32 cost effectively. If you're wanting to get into a digital mixer, a lot of times I recommend the XR18 or the XR12, depending on your price range. I pretty much won't touch a fully analog. I want a digital mixer for everything because I want to be. I'm so used to having all the processing that I can't even. And I have bought literally hundreds of analog mixers, so it's not like I've always been that way. But once I kind of turned a corner, that's why I kind of look at that. But again, if you're a newbie and you just want it to work, that's probably not the right solution. But if you're a newbie that wants to keep growing, right now I think the most cost effective are a lot of the Behringer lines, just because once they bought Midas, they took a turn from being complete and utter schlock to something that was actually pretty good. Victor, and then Jeff, and then Tucker.
I've had really great luck with the Mackies. Pro FX 10B3 will let you grow into it. $200, plenty of room there for you to grow into something. Mackies have good preamps.
Jeff?
Something I recommend to a lot of like churches that are going to have volunteers working is the Yamaha TF series. If they want a physical console with faders, it's digital, very easy to use. One-touch compressors and EQs, that kind of thing.
That's great. Tucker?
Yeah, typically with somebody brand new, the going analog first is a good option, just as far as being able to learn actual signal flow without getting confused by the kind of where you can go with the digital consoles. If you want a digital console that still follows that analog workflow, the smaller Allen Heath digital stuff is also really, really good.
That's great.
Kind of a good bridge point.
Next question.
I would agree with all that stuff. Kyle Hammond says, a friend is having, this is really interesting. A friend is having issues with Safari hijacking audio settings. His audio is very low within a Google Meet, so we tested Zoom. When he closed Safari, Zoom kicked in with a decent volume. Preferences wouldn't allow change, so it seems to be something in Safari. Any ideas?
Go ahead, Greg.
I don't really have any solutions. All I know is that I have seen this question pop up a number of times in forums.
Yeah.
With no really good answers, except go go back into your preferences, into the security preferences, and make sure that all the correct microphone things are assigned to to Zoom and stuff like that. But nobody seems to really have an answer.
Tucker, and then Jeffrey.
That I will say that's one of the reasons why I do tend to lean toward Audio Hijack for some of those things, is you can isolate out what application is using what sound card, even if ahead of it they're using the same sound card, because some applications grab a hold of the sound card and do their own thing with it, auto gain and different things, and that can affect other applications.
Yeah, that's great. Jeffrey?
Two things I need to know. First of all, what version of Mac software are they running? And second of all, what version of Safari are they running? But then go in and close out everything. And that includes your Dropbox. That includes your any web. If you got like 5,000 tabs on the web page, you got to get rid of all that stuff because something else might be hijacking it from there. Those would be the shotgun effect ideas there.
Yep. Next question.
Okay, moving on. Dorian says, I would like to use the audio coming in from a VoIP desktop client to mix into a video chat with Zoom. What would be the best way to do this on a Mac? I don't have a physical mixer.
I would say probably loopback, or it would be loopback. Go ahead, Tucker.
That's it. Loopback.
Yeah. So
yep. One word
is,
answer.
Yeah. The loopback is, and I would highly recommend buying the pair. Like Audio Hijack and loopback is a little bit more expensive together, but I would buy them because you
save $30 buying them together.
Yeah. I bought them separately for some reason. I thought, oh, I only need this one, and then I was like, okay, I only need this one, and then I had both of them. So the those two are just incredible. With great power comes great responsibility. When you put those in, a lot of signal chain problems we see here in our panel are related to people. You'll see me kind of, if I hear something really weird, I'll almost always go back to figuring out if they've got a software chain on their Mac. But so it can be problematic, but at the same time they are indispensable. And like I think tomorrow we're going to try to use the question system again, and when we do that, we're going to we may wait till Saturday. We're making a couple changes, but we're going to stream it to the app, and all it is one little box, an audio hijack that says take this audio and pass it to the internet, and so it's an amazing. They got rid of, they used to have a a webcaster for audio, and it's now just built into Audio Hijack. So it's kind of it's a slick set of tools. All right, next question.
Stan Chan says, recommended ND filter for the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 6K.
I think that would depend on the lens.
I knew what all those letters meant.
Yeah, exactly. I think it depends on the lens, right? So you just need an ND filter for your lens. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, every different lens has a different lens filter size. So if it's 82 millimeters or 77 millimeters, you're going to be in trouble. And some people use what are called step up and step down rings to fit one size filter onto another size lens. That generally is not the greatest idea in the world, I don't think. So
the one thing when traveling in general, that I recommend, there's a lot of back and forth about this, is I almost always have a UV filter on the front of my lenses, and then I take them off on really high, like if I really want great stuff, I'll take them off and shoot without them, but I keep them on all the time. It just protects your lens, and on a general operation, it's a good, you can take lots of pictures with it. Again, if I'm taking something that's serious, I'll take it off, but then I put it back on because it's like a lens cap that you can shoot through. The way I think of it. Go ahead, Bill, and then Victor, and then Mickey, and then we'll go on. 15 seconds each.
Could not agree more. There is nothing worse than having something from outer space tap your lens and you're going, oh my gosh, then you go, oh, I have a skylight filter on it. It's just going to hurt the filter, not the lens. And that's the difference between $1,000 fix and a $10 fix.
Right, Victor?
Not as good as having several ND filters, but you can get a variable adjustable filter from ND2 to ND whatever, and that can sometimes take care of your problem, especially indoors. I'll put a link to one that I'm using successfully.
Mickey?
Yeah, going back to what Bill was saying earlier, it depends on what lens you're using. If you're shooting more of a cinema style or even some run and gun shoots, you can use square filters on a matte box. So
I was going to say that. I was like, is it too much to say matte box? But matte boxes that's what they're for.
Yeah, 4x4.
It shouldn't be on a
6x6
6K camera.
Yeah, 4x4 or 6x6 filters. The really popular ones are from Tiffin and also Lee filters. And they're rock solid.
Yeah, those are, that's great especially when you're shooting, you're trying to make decisions quickly. So you'll see a DP that really knows what they're doing with a matte box, and they're just pulling them in and out. Like, okay, what does this look like? What does this look like?
Quickly change with trace instead of screwing on filters from lens to lens.
And
keep the matte box on, and you don't have to think about it.
Again, and that's more than you want to do if you're just putting it in your backpack. But if you're really shooting something, putting that matte box on is going to let you be creative too, because you can have gradation filters, you can have color filter. There's all kinds of things that you can throw in there that you would never do if you had it on. Even if you had those collections, unscrewing and screwing, you would never do it because the iteration rate is too slow for a production. Next question.
Laura Seal says, I've been using an ATOMOS Ninja to record online events I want to watch later. Using HDMI out of my MacBook Pro. Problem is even ProRes LT, these files are huge. Looking for an external MP4 recorder, screen capture software, or a best solution for archiving smaller files.
Go ahead, Jeffrey. And then Chuck.
Well, the easiest way to do it is to get a computer with a capture card and then use something like OBS Wirecast vMix to bring that in. That'll be a little bit more expensive. OBS would be free. But another way to do it is some of these new tech connects, the NDI connects. You don't need to use the NDI. It does have an SD card in some of them that you can end up recording through there and using, and they record to MP4.
Chuck, and then Yashai, and then Mickey.
Well, I had this problem a little bit, and one of the solutions I came up with was I was using just a A10 Mini Pro, or I have a Roland VR4, just out into either Wirecast or Livestream Studio just to record on the hard disk. I've used the NDI recorder, NDI of my screen to another laptop, and that can get good quality, but I've had some problems with it. I have never had good luck with screen capture software. So,
for run and gun setup, ScreenFlow, it's very reliable. I did the recording almost 4 or 5 hours with it. The key is to change the resolution of the screen to really big resolution, like lower it like 720p. And then in the screen capture, you can tell it to capture a real estate of just the screen. So the file become, in comparison, smaller if you need it just to record for your own reference.
Mickey?
Yeah, if it's just for watching later, QuickTime capture with loop back to route the audio into QuickTime.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, or I was going to say if time's not an issue, just can reconvert later.
Yeah. So the one thing I'll say is that I tend not to record. I mean, I do a lot of screen captures with QuickTime, and then if I want more than that, I'll tend to use an external recorder, mostly because I do see frame rate issues. You know, we found frame rate issues with records that are done with screen capture. It's variable. Frame rate doesn't lock, you know, on what's going out. The one that I would think about is also a HyperDeck Mini, which will record H.264 to an SD card. And you can just have a HyperDeck Mini that's just sitting next to you. You route it out. You may have to have an SDI. I don't know if I've never tried to put HDMI into it, so I can't think of that. But you can just know that you can, if you converted, that's like the little SDI output, you know, the tap or whatever that you put in out of your computer could go right into that as SDI or HDMI. And then at that point, you just push a button and it records. You could even set it to push a button on you know, anything, or have it. You could say it and have it do it if you want to with a little code. But that'd be a really quick way to record stuff externally.
A couple of people in chat are actually saying the HyperDeck Mini has SDI in only, no HDMI.
That's what I'm saying. So you use a SDI, like a little the Blackmagic tap out to get the SDI out of there if you needed to. Bill?
Doesn't the ATEM Mini Pro have a little port out for a thumb drive or something? You can record an H.264 scrape of your show to. I thought that was one of its
If you got the
features.
Pro, yeah, absolutely. And the Pro and the Mini HyperDeck are so close that but you still have another external device that you'd be hooking to it. The HyperDeck would be this nice little thing. You see the screen, you know, you'd see your screen in the screen. You know, you'd have a little SD card, you hit record, it just does the thing. If I was doing this all the time and I wanted H.264s, I'd probably use that, for that process. Anyway, next question.
Thank you, Laura. A. Mitchell says, Dave Knode, good to see you back. Congrats on the event. Curious to hear more about the video from Mount Rushmore. Camera positions, how was it cut, press feeds, independent cameras, transmission options out from the site.
Dave, are you able to share that?
I can. I've got some. Let's see. Am I able to share my screen?
Nikki, can you make him?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay. Share screen. All right. So here's a few little Google photos. Let me get this chat window out of here. We had 9 cameras. Mm-hmm. We were 4 of them were PTZs. We had
what type of PTZs?
The Panasonic 150s. And the 3-chip ones. Mm-hmm. Let's see here. We also had a camera in a plane. Can you see this photo? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'll just this is the statues in Mount Rushmore. Mm-hmm. This is the amphitheater. The stage was down here. These are parking decks. There was overflow in this parking lot. This parking lot is where all the tractor trailers would fit, and then we'd have to shuttle down a little road past the sculpture studio to the stage. This is where Marine One landed, and then they shuttled the president there. There's actually Marine One from the aerial camera. We didn't take that to screen. We weren't allowed. We took the main stage and we built it up 3 levels. Golly. I don't know if that was loud to you, but it was loud to me. We added these truss towers on the side with line arrays. If you see right here at the bottom, there's a riser with 4 cameras. We had camera position 1 and 3. Camera position 2 was White House. Let me just pause that. Camera position 4 was the press pool from Fox News. There was also a riser over here near this guy's hand that had 2 traveling press positions. Press that came on Air Force One. It had White House TV and another camera. I forget what it was. We also had a PTZ up here on the set. It was supposed to be down here for an over-the-shoulder shot. Can you see my mouse?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. But we ended up moving it at the last second up onto the set here. Let's see. Let's kick through a few other pictures.
Why did you move it?
We couldn't see anything. Oh, I'll tell you why we moved it. The original set design had the seating section came out to about here on either side, and we were going to shoot across and shoot the governor and several Congress people were here. So we were going to shoot across at eye level to them. And then we had another camera planned here that was going to shoot across to the president. First lady was here. President was here. Presidential family VIPs were here. See this little black flag? That's actually one of 2 Space Force flags in existence. It showed up on Air Force One. We had lots of fireworks.
And did you have this all when you were planning out the cameras? Did you have it all modeled? Were you doing, basically putting them in 3D models to get your camera angles and so on and so forth?
Not really. We did build everything in Vectorworks. We also had a 25-foot Jimmy jib over on the other side. Now you can see the Space Force flag. And you can see the president. These were LED walls, 7.5 millimeter row. We had 4 of those. Plus there were 4 pop-ups out in remote parking lots and such. All of the production went back. Our crew got pulled over on the way to the airport and got a ticket for speeding. That was kind of fun. Let's see.
We're going to go back to questions here pretty quickly, but anything?
Yeah. One fun tidbit is 8 hours before the show. Oh, here's a neat picture. We also had a giant screen for the president to watch the show himself. Right. This is an LED wall. And then this was an overflow. None of the people on the top deck could see the stage. In front of the house was giant tents. And lastly, 8 hours before the show started, our crew got locked in one of the 2 production trailers, and we had to beat the doorknob off with a hammer. The switcher and all the robo control and streams were all locked in this trailer. And this is 8 hours before show. We're that's our head of audio beating them.
There'll be. I guess there's going to be new tools, new things go into the build now.
So just some fun tidbits, things you don't see every day.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dave.
Sure thing.
All right. Next question.
David Rewalt says, do they make headphone extension cables? Do they make a headphone extension cable with a threaded 3.5 millimeter connection?
I have never seen one.
I think they're thinking about, is it possible they're thinking about the Sony ones that screw on?
Right.
Yeah,
Sony 7506.
I have one right here.
Yeah, the 1/8 inch to, go ahead.
Has one?
Oh yeah, that's the, right. Oh, that's an extension, but that's there you go. So that's designed for that headphone, right?
Yeah, but it's a standard 1/8 inch jack. And I have another one that came with something.
Right.
Just had. I mean, they're relatively common, more common than I would have expected, actually.
Right. The main thing
the
is matching
advantage to that
threading.
is you wouldn't accidentally unplug it.
Yeah, I think that's the
that's
the key to
really
the
the
operation.
objective. So you don't.
Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, the standard Sony 7506 cans that thousands of people use have a threaded and a little 1/4 inch adapter on top of that. So the problem is if you buy the third-party connectors that have a flat base and you try to plug those in, sometimes the connection can be a little bit iffy. So it's good to have a couple of those spare around if you use those headphones.
Courtney, were you showing something there? I couldn't quite see it. No.
Yeah, that is the adapter for the Sony headphones.
Oh, that's the adapter. So I think I think he was
So you
looking
can
for an
see it's
extension
threaded.
cord.
I don't know of any extension cord.
Right.
I think the Calrad used to make one that had a screw down. It's the opposite. This is female, and they're looking for one that's probably male that'll screw onto the onto the.
I think the easiest thing is just to adapt both ends. Go to 1/4 inch on the headphone, then do a 1/4 inch extension cable, and then adapt the other end down to.
You end up with a whole bunch of things. Yeah, every time we add one, we add more instability. Go ahead, Mickey.
One sec. Okay, this
Isn't that what duct tape is for? To keep all your
yeah, exactly.
You can get the replacement cables for Audio Technica headphones, or I think there's a house brand of B&H called Senal. You can get replacement cables for them, which is essentially the threaded. One side is the threaded 3.5 mil, and the other one I think is a 2.5 mil, and I like soldering, so I just snip that off and put whatever connector I want.
A lot of that. This is the second time today. Maggie's like, yeah, I just cut it off and just put a new one. I will say
that headphones that I was showing, that extension cable is from Ultrasound.
The thing that I do want to point out that Mickey has is having the skill of soldering and having the skill of like building cables and stuff like that does give you a lot more freedom where you can just go, oh, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to get good at it.
It's so much cheaper. It's so much cheaper to make your own cables because, like, I can buy I think a box of 50 XLR males for so much cheaper, like the price of one single cable.
Well, and you can have really high quality cables too. I mean, you can get the best cable and the best, Neutrik connectors and Star Quad cable and put them together yourself. And they're still going to be a quarter of the price if you're going to buy them on Amazon for, even not one that's that great. And like, we're about to build a bunch of stuff. So I just ordered 1,500 feet of BNC and then a whole bunch of, 800 connectors. And we'll sit there and listen to music and build all of our cables as we and
real
we're
quick,
they're all built to the length.
What do you like for BNC, for raw BNC cable, Alex?
When I'm wiring locations, I can't. It's a really. Let's see if I have one around here. Hold on. Talk amongst yourselves for a second. I'll grab it.
Time for show and tell.
In the meantime, I will say that in my career, I have mastered the skill of snipping the end off of cable, but not soldering.
Yeah, I'm still terrible at soldering.
That's step one.
I use Belden 1694F.
Yeah, Belden's my go-to as well.
Yeah,
Belden
or
and Canary for
1855.
short.
Yeah,
Canary
if
for
it's
short
inside a
runs.
rack, I use 1855 because it's the little bitty skinny stuff and it's easy to do all your management inside the rack. For anything that's long in field use, it's 1694.
And when people say they're terrible at soldering, that's not something that should put you off. It requires a modicum of coordination, and
It takes practice. It takes practice.
Oh, yeah, but it's not an unattainable
and those little clippy things. That's the hard part.
So
is getting the little
Google.
clippy
So
things.
don't Google soldering pictures
Look
or
at
follow
this
their directions on how they
degenerate
build it.
when
So
Alex leaves.
so this is a Clark cable. It's 23 gauge, and I build my stuff with it because I won't run it more than 50 feet or 60 feet at most on a length. But it'll do 12K. I mean, it'll do 12G, at 50 feet, no problem. And then I'm terminating these are the Neutrik's rear twists, and I have all kinds of colors for them. And a lot of times I'll color the cable or I'll color the, I'll color both of them. But the main thing is, and then the big thing is you decide what you're going to use. Again, for the longer ones, we have to we do them more by hand. I have I don't think I have it right in front of me, but I have a motorized stripper that's made by Coastal Cable. I think I posted it in Discord the other day, and it's calibrated to this cable or this exact one, so that I can just sit there and stick it in and pull it out and pull everything out. And I will do a video on it. We're going to be building a bunch of them. So what I'm going to do is one of the mornings that we're building this stuff, I'm going to jump in here and I'll build a bunch of, build some cables with you all. You can see how I do it. I don't know if I'm the best at it. I think Marty's probably better at it than I am, but I have a very specific process that I use that right now I'm running about 4 minutes and 20 seconds per cable, both ends complete. So, and it's not, I've seen people go faster, but I also am pretty careful not to nick any of the shielding. And I use a silicone pry tool that was some kind of clippers that I tore apart.
You've got to tell me what the motorized stripper is, because that would save me so much time.
Coastal Cable makes it. I put it in Discord the other day, and I'll post it up. But I have to admit I'm spoiled because I started with it and I never did it by hand with the little hand stripper. So when I have a hand stripper, and every time I do it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is insane. I would never do this again. Now, admittedly, the Coastal Cable one is about $1,000 with all the parts. But if you're going to do a lot of cables, I would never do them. I would never do them by hand. If you're going to do a couple, the little thumb tool is great. But if you're going to do a lot of them, you want something that's going to go. And they make desktop versions and they make handheld versions. I have the handheld version. Marty has the handheld version, and I have his version. So it's anyway. So Mickey.
Yeah, just going back to the original question. If the question was about extending the microphone inputs for stuff like as Chris mentioned, the Sennheiser, the Sony wireless transmitters, and also the Sennheiser ones that receive mini jack microphones. There are male connectors. The popular ones are from Switchcraft, or the house brand of B&H is a Pearstone. My favorite ones are the ones from Remote Audio because they're nice and short. And for the female end, Switchcraft also makes those. I'll put a link in the chat.
Yeah, great. Okay, we're going to now go into speed. And yeah, Jeffrey Powers is showing the one that I use there. Next,
Isaac Lay says, currently using OBS virtual camera plugin to use my Sony A5100 through the Elgato Camlink 4K on a Mac with Zoom. What's your go-to virtual cam app on the Mac? Bonus points for PC options too.
I use Memo Live every day to go into Blue Jeans and Meet. So now I have a mini recorder, and those two apps won't see the mini recorder for that. I had a web presenter, but it's in a system right now, another system. So anyway, so I use that as my kind of throughput, and it takes me a minute to do it. It's anyway. Any other moment? Okay, we'll keep going. Next question.
Karen Foote says, is it bad to leave camera and light batteries charging once they've reached 100% charge?
Go ahead, Mickey, and then Bill, and then we'll move on. We're going to move really fast.
Most decent chargers know when the batteries have reached optimal voltage, and they'll stop giving current. And the batteries won't take current either. So,
Bill,
100% what Mickey said. If the charger is intelligent, you shouldn't have any problem with sticking them on and leave them forever. If you buy a really cheap charger, watch out.
Yep. Next question.
My power tools have smart chargers. Hi all, I'm using Mimo Live. This is Gabriel Ng. Mimo Live to live stream to Vimeo. I need to mix between local and remote presenters. What's the best way to manage local and remote PowerPoint presentation decks? Presenters also want full control and picture-in-picture while presenting. Wow.
Let's table that one because we're right at the end of the hour. I know you asked it earlier, but again, for everyone watching, it's important to vote these questions up if you want to have them answered in detail. We went into a little too much detail on a couple of these ones, but let's talk about that one on Monday. We're gonna talk about Keynote on Monday, and and bring that up as a remote how do you do remote presentation, and we'll compare and contrast different ways to do that. So we're gonna talk about presentations on Monday. All right, next question.
Steve says, can Guy tell us how his Interrotron experiment is going?
I'm just kind of playing with a prompter here. You can see Andrew. Hey, wave, Andrew. So you can see the prompter. I could pin somebody from this side, and it's just a PC. And I swapped out this little 15-inch monitor for a 27-inch. I'm still trying to figure out the best framing here to get somebody so I can see them full frame, because I'm using this for interviews too, because we're virtual. So I'm doing interviews. I'm putting the questions on the left side, and then I'm able to look at the person and keep eye contact. But that's basically it. That's how it's going.
Yep. Great. Next question.
Robert Baker says, a week or so ago, I had questions about the viability of New Blue Titler Presenter for Wirecast. After using it twice, I found it to be unusable for a one-man operation to use effectively. What is anyone else using for live titling for a stream for a one-man operator?
Chuck?
So one of the things I learned about New Blue Titler is that they have a really wonderful integration with the Stream Deck. And there is both a way in the New Blue Titler Present with Wirecast to be able to do key logging, or basically, assign a keystroke. But with the Stream Deck, it actually will bring up your title preview into it. I don't have it set up right now, but this is what it looks like for the Stream Deck, and you can have all your titles preset, and they will populate across your Stream Deck. I found that's the most effective way to do it quickly.
Jason and then Jeffrey, 15 seconds each.
Here to Record has a beautiful app that's completely free, and just use it.
Jeffrey?
Really quick, little hack, you can put Wirecast on two machines. A lot of licenses allow that, so you could probably put that and use New Blue Titler on another machine and bring it into the main machine.
Next question.
What are great BNC SDI crimping tools.
I don't have the brand in front of me. It is a good one. I just don't have it right in front of me. So I will have to. We'll come back to that.
Klein Tools.
Klein. I think it's probably Klein. Yep. All right. We did it. not well. It wasn't pretty at the end. We had to skip a couple ones. So but we did get to the end of the questions there. So anyway, so we're gonna now reset and move to our more focused conversation. And again, as I said before, we're going to talk about Foley. We've got Greg Curda here, and he is a longtime Foley operator, as well as sound. There's all kinds of other things that an educator that Greg has done over his career. And so what we're going to do is, if you have questions, as we start to, I'm going to start asking Greg some questions. But as we move forward, your job is to start asking questions about Foley, about audio, about recording. Those are the kind of things that we want to start discussing here. So start thinking through that. We'll take the Q&A first, but if folks are in the panel here want to ask questions, also raise your hand for that. Greg, how did you get into this? How did you get started?
What a long, strange trip it's been. I started at the tender age of 18. A good friend of my father's was a picture editor in Chicago, and he was looking for an apprentice. He had just promoted his apprentice to an assistant, and he was looking for a new apprentice. And so I said, sure, why not? And he had a bunch of national clients, but he was also the main sound editor on a show called the Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. I don't remember if any of you guys remember that show.
Oh yeah.
So
I remember watching it. I didn't know. I don't think I even knew what Mutual of Omaha was, but I definitely grew up watching Wild Kingdom. I thought it was one of the best. Anyone our age completely remembers it, and it's some of the best content marketing, I would say, because of that.
It was the original nature show, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway, so I worked there for a while. I graduated high school, and then I went to conservatory at DePaul University Music School. Got a music degree. Kept cutting, and actually the cutting paid for most of my school. I had a very small student loan, which I paid off right away, thank God. And then I had an ensemble. Highly esoteric. We designed and built our own instruments, and we played totally improvisational music.
Interesting.
Well, yeah, it was. You could either like it or not like it, but you couldn't say they're playing it wrong because nobody would know. And
Right.
and the critics brought this up a number of times, but we started getting all kinds of grants, and we ran 3 or 4 years, and I don't know. Then I got an offer from another friend of mine who had gone to Berkeley School of Music in Boston, who had moved out to L.A. And he said, if you want to come out and play, I can offer you $200 a week, you know. And
right.
You know, in 1980, $200 a week was pretty good.
Right.
So I'm like, yeah. And I kind of wanted to go to LA and see if I could play with the big boys anyway. Anyway, Chris, by the way, can you see that? Can you see the shot that Mickey's got up? Oh, no. Go back to the Lee one.
That was the pre-beard days.
Yeah, that's me telling him someday, man, I'm gonna look like you, man. Someday. Anyway, so I moved out to LA, and it turned out that within 6 months, the guy who had hired me, and there's a long story about who the guy was, but I won't go into that. The guy who hired me, it turned out he was financing the band through certain less than legal activities in Orange County, and he got popped on a couple of counts, and so that whole thing went away. I got a 1968 green Ford LTD 500 out of it, but that was about it. And that was then my car moving around in LA with, you know. Anyway, I had no idea what I was going to do. I had no idea what, you know, I said, well, man, maybe I should try and get a job cutting or something like that. But God, here we are in this big market. And I ran into one of the mixers at one of the studios I used to record at. And he said, you know, whenever I get into a situation like this, I go see this gal at I think Alice or something, what her name was, at this temp agency in Apple One Temps in Glendale. And so I went there, and she specializes in placing people in the studios, just in temp jobs. So the first job I got was as a secretary for Robert Towne, the writer. And he went on vacation for a couple of weeks, and the secretary went on vacation for a couple of weeks. And I only got one call a day, and that was from the secretary asking if there were any calls. So so I said, well, you know, this is great. The gal from the agency calls, hey, how's it going? You know, I've checked. Everybody thinks you're doing a great job. And I'm like, really? Hey, that's fantastic. This is all I have to do. I said, you got anything else? And she said, well, yeah, I do have something else in it. It's at Disney. So I went into Disney, and I ended up in the mailroom. And from the way Disney used to work, the mailroom, how would I know, was the gateway, you know, to all things. So I'm hounding the editorial department every day. I've got samples. I got national commercials, United Airlines, Mercedes-Benz, Piper Airplanes, good clients, great stuff. Nobody wants to see my reel. Nobody would. But for some reason, the secretary in the sound department liked me. So she says, Gregory, she called me Gregory. Gregory, there's going to be an opening in the sound department soon, and I'm going to put your name forward. I said, oh, Angela, really?
Very formal.
Oh, how nice. Oh, how thank you very much. Come to the interview. Turns out the guy who's interviewing me is from Chicago, and he knows the guy that trained me, Jim Bourgeois.
So then you're off.
Yeah, so I'm off. Started at the bottom, carrying cans back and forth around the lot to transfer facilities, whatever. I graduated to patching, you know, for aligning the recorders. And it was all mag and stuff, except for one stage where we were doing circle vision for Disney World. And that was a bunch of Mitsubishi 32-track digital recorders. I don't know if you guys remember those, some of the first digital recorders, but they required nearly hourly alignment. Yeah, I mean, and each machine had its own air conditioning thing going to it.
Right.
Anyway, I kind of worked my way up, and as things happened, somebody got sick. I got thrown into a new position. Somebody got sick again. I got elevated here. And then Disney had just signed a deal with, what's his name? Stephen Cannell, to do Foley on all his shows. A-Team, Hunter, Stingray. I mean, you know, I'm dating myself, obviously. Yeah, hang on to that one, Mickey. We'll come back to that. And so I started working on the Foley stage, and just, you know, the first day is just praying nothing's going to go wrong. And continued on, then started doing some features. Mickey, go back to that one with Ed. Oh, you don't know who Ed is. The one you had up before. That one. No, next one. That one. Okay, can you put that? Okay, this is the Foley stage at Disney, stage C, and this is the setup for Cocktail, the film Cocktail, Tom Cruise.
Right.
So what we wanted to do is that the Foley artist wanted to do this whole thing organically. He didn't want to have to stop and move the mics and start readjusting all these things. He just wanted to do it as it flowed through the picture, which was a great way to do it. So
what you're doing here is you're looking at that screen.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should explain this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's look at that one. Foley is the art of creating sound effects in sync with picture. Okay, so it's a performance. As opposed to taking effects, for instance, out of the library and cutting them to fit. Okay, so you're performing these as if you were the actor. So there's all kinds of things that go into that performance. The feeling is probably the most important. The sound, yes, of course, is important, but it's the way that the way the things are manipulated, especially the footsteps. We don't think about this, but typically all footsteps are very carefully crafted according to the character. You know, the personality of the character. Does he have a certain kind of a walk? What is it? You know, what is his general demeanor? And you can see this is the new stage at Paramount that I moved to.
And these different surfaces are all so that you can get different sounds of things impacting those different surfaces.
Correct. And it took us a long time to work this out because the way they're arranged is they're arranged in the most normal ways of having to change from one to another. Okay, the bad thing to do is to stop on one surface and then try to pick up recording on the next surface. Okay, now don't forget, guys, this is all analog. Okay, there's no digital anything. So I had a full film chain, which is 35 millimeter film with Kodu, actually with it's like tape.
Right.
It's like tape on film. And I also had a okay, there's the, you can show that one. This was my gem. That's a Studer 3x24 console. And those Studer preamps were the cleanest preamps I have ever, even to this day, ever encountered. Just insane. But you don't need a lot of inputs. You need a lot of playback. So you can see the 24 grid kind of up on the right. The sidecar over here was for arming the tracks. I eventually got rid of that. And also the motion control was an older, very bulky kind of motion control. I got rid of that and I had it put in the panel where the two red master faders are there. But the other thing is that our ear hears things much differently than a microphone does. So the Foley artists who are doing these effects, who are performing these effects, are hearing these effects live in, themselves, and what it sounds like to me could be totally different. Right. So it takes a while for you to learn each other's things, and at some point the Foley artist has to trust the mixer to make it sound like what we're needing. And for instance, they might say, well, what does this sound like? I say, well, it sounds okay. Can you take that just a little off mic? So for instance, they move it just a little bit out of the pattern, thin the sound out a little bit, and all of a sudden it's what we needed.
Right.
Okay, so inches really count. Right. In mic placement. So
and I imagine it just how long will it take to do, let's say, a scene or just one shot? How much rehearsal, how much setup, how much does it take to do one of those? By and large, the pros in LA, the guys in the studios, there really isn't much rehearsal.
They just do it.
They just do it. Well, the whole thing with the studio system is that it breaks people up into very, very specific tasks, and you just do that task. Right. Okay. And if it weren't for later in my life, I would know nothing at all about sound except Foley.
Right.
Okay.
Now, do you find yourself distracted all the time about listening to sounds around you? Of like, I wonder what thinking about how you would make that, or just being attracted to it as far as how sounds work.
For 10 years, I didn't go to the movies.
Right.
The last thing I wanted to do on any of my, there's me and Jimmy. There's the last thing I wanted to do with any of my time off was go to the movies.
Right.
Okay. And it was painful for me because I was analyzing everything. It took me a while to get over that. And it wasn't until I left Hollywood, actually, that I started getting over that.
Well, when I think about it, because when I worked on the Queen ship for, it was a big silver ship, and all I could see was chrome. Like I would see chrome. I would almost wreck if a big tanker would drive by me, because I would sit there and be staring at how the light goes across it and how it, how those scratches work and the scale and what does it look like on the edge and everything else. Because all I was doing for a year and a half was this big silver ship. So I can only imagine doing 10 years of Foley where you're hearing all these things, and it seems like even all during the off hours, I'd be paying attention to it. That's how it feels for me.
Well, Alex, you brought up something the other day about knowing what would minimally work, a baseline of something that will work, and adding on up, above that.
Right.
It got to be so that every cue, we knew what was going to work, but how can we make it better?
Right. No, absolutely.
So it almost became intuitive. We'd hear the stuff before we actually did any of it.
Right.
It was odd.
Martin in Argentina asks, do you always record the sounds live, or do you also mix them with previously recorded sounds?
No, that's the previously recorded sounds would be the jurisdiction of the sound effects editors.
Right.
They'll use sound effects that they pull from the library, or that they go out and record themselves in nature, or any specific.
And you're basically, they're mixing in. You're giving them a set of tracks that are synced with the picture.
Exactly.
And then they're going to add all the other ambient or other things that they want to do.
Exactly. The stems are there's dialogue, there's ADR. Mm-hmm. Which is replacement dialogue for the dialogue that was either not good on production or they wanted it changed. Then there's the backgrounds, production effects, sound effects, Foley, and typically any sound design elements, and then music.
Chris,
so
go ahead. No, yeah. Go ahead, Greg. Finish.
No, Chris.
Okay, go ahead, Chris.
Greg, I was curious, when you're assigned to Foley a scene, is there like a checklist, like we need these steps, we need these glasses, we need this stuff, or do they say just make this better?
Okay, well, things have changed a little bit over time and around the world. I'm part of another Zoom group that's a worldwide Foley organization.
I want in.
It's very cool. I'll give you the link. At any rate, there's always there's several Foley editors who are associated with each film, and there's a Foley supervisor, and then there's the regular editors. So the supervisor will go through the picture with the supervising editor and possibly even the director if he really likes Foley, and they'll go through and they'll spot everything. And in the old days, they would create these cue sheets, which is everything. Where everything's supposed to happen. Nowadays, we do it in Pro Tools, by just assigning little region groups and kind of making a placeholder for where that effect is going to go. But so they would kind of plan everything out, because they'd know where, for instance, if there's going to be a lot of ADR, they're going to replace a lot of the dialogue. For a fact that you're going to have to cover that section wall to wall. Because you have to create what we call an M&E, which is a music and effects track, or you can look at it as a dialogue minus for international, for foreign. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, keep going. No, go ahead.
Okay. So we would basically follow the cue sheet as it goes along. Exactly what we put in there would be mostly up to us. A lot of times we'd have the Foley supervisor would want to sit on the stage with us. And then it's kind of their input, our input, and a team decision.
And how many takes does it take to do it?
Depends. The guys that I've worked with, A lot of times footsteps, they don't even want to see the picture. They just roll and record. And, 8 times out of 10, they hit it. It's muscle memory. It's the way that you're functioning all the time, every day. And we worked double shifts for years. It was insane. When I actually went to one shift, it was like I had no idea what to do with my time. Yeah. No, so then there's that, and of course in those days there's a lot of things that are very easily done now that we couldn't really do on the spot then. Nudging things back, into sync if it was a little off, that kind of stuff. We'd have to rely on the editors, and that's where the supervisor would say, "No, don't worry, I'll move it." Right. Moving on. So typically, for a big feature, we would get, let's say it was, they were broken up into reels, typically 900 to 1,000 foot reels of film. Right. Not 9 minutes a piece, roughly. So let's say we had a 10 reel film. Typically, we would get like 20 days. Right. 2 days a reel, a day for the footsteps, and then a day for the props. Interesting. But we used to go a lot way beyond the normal stuff, and we started. It's just funny to think about just all the. I'm never going to see a movie again not thinking about all the footsteps, because you're really creating pretty much all of that, right? You don't really pick up anything during the shoot, so pretty much every time you hear a footstep. Right, exactly. In fact, they make all that hush foam stuff that you put on the soles of the. If you're in a particularly boomy location, or they have hard shoes, right? You don't want to hear all that stuff, because it's hard to strip it out of the dialogue. Yeah. So yeah, well, and it's fascinating, because I think it's something that distinguishes American films more from international films. Is international films oftentimes don't have the budget to do as much Foley. I mean, I feel like it's a much more natural record on foreign films than American films. It's just not the same culture, or not the same budget, or not the same thing to get as much of that. Right, and I think that what I'm finding out is the processes are different. Right. For instance, a lot of the Europeans use single Foley artists, and he'll do the whole thing. In the U.S., it's always teams, because you just for LA, it's a little different up north. One of my really good friends, John Rush, is up at the ranch now, and he's probably one of the best Foley artists in the world. And he gets a lot. He gets a lot of time. But LA is really it's a factory, right? So you have to crank, and there's not a lot of room for experimentation. You try to experiment a little bit, and you make changes in your process and in your setup incrementally. Yep. No, absolutely. Andrew, and then Sky, and then Jeffrey.
When you're recording things like footsteps, do you do like block recording? Like, do you do all the footsteps through all 10 reels, or do you just do reel by reel on all the sound effects in that particular reel?
Well, when it was based on reels, it was easier to go reel by reel, because then you wouldn't have to change it on the projector. It just the film stays on the projector, and you do everything in that reel and then get rid of it. I have heard, I haven't done this personally, but I have heard that there are some people that build the whole show out in Pro Tools. I mean, I wouldn't do that personally. I think you should still break it up. Right. But it's good to do things in sections. Yeah, Kenny Hampton asks, can you tell the work from one Foley actor to another? Are there actor signatures? Do you mean, can I tell the difference between who performed the Foley? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, probably not so much now, right. But at the time during the day, yes, absolutely, I could. That's interesting. Sky.
I'm very curious. The origin of the name Foley, I think, was the original person that created this. The other question is, in that closet of props that you have, I'd love to hear some of the things that you make the sounds with things that shouldn't make that sound, but for instance, celery and things, the tips that behind the scenes. I'd love to hear that.
The stuff that makes the sounds is never, almost never what you see.
Such
okay.
as.
Well,
so I've heard,
almost
celery, for instance.
Yeah, celery in a wet chamois, is bones breaking and gush and a stabbing, and there's all kinds of stories. Watermelons, guys bringing in sides of beef for the punches. Okay, sure. There's a lot of ways to do it. But, baseball gloves are used extensively. Leather gloves are used extensively.
And what do you use them for?
Punches.
Punches. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. ECM 50 in the catcher's mitt.
I've looked in some of those closets in those Foley match frame, for instance, there in LA in North Hollywood, and the crazy toys and tinkle stuff. And
well, you said an ECM 50 in a catcher's mitt, so can you explain that a little bit?
Well, typically, one of the things that you have trouble with any kind of condenser mic is getting a really solid, huge transient impact, loud. Okay, the capsules just aren't built for that. That's something where you want a dynamic mic close up to really get that punch. Now the exception was the ECM 50. And of all, I don't know if you guys remember, it used to be a standard on all broadcasters, but it's a really big thing. You can't hide it. There's no hiding. But they still make it, and it has a very, very full frequency sound. I would say that the closest in the low end that I can think of is the DPA.
Now, do you put it in a, when you say put it with the mic, do you put it right on the, how do you position it with the catcher's mitt? It's just right next to it?
Well, it depends. There's all kinds of different ways. You can slide it in to your hand. You can put it up inside one of the fingers. You can try to tape it to the webbing, either on the inside of the web or the outside of the web. You can actually put it on the back of your hand.
Right.
There's the thing about Foley is that it's a playpen. It's a sandbox.
Yeah.
And the thing is, how quickly can you get to the sound that you want? How close can you get from an educated guess?
Right.
Oh, I think this prop will do this. Now, Sky, when I first started at Disney, we still had a lot of those old Jimmy McDonald props. And I don't know if you guys know, but he made all kinds of physical contraptions, rain machines and wind machines and all this stuff for all the cartoons.
And that big sheets of metal to make the lightning.
The thunder sheet. Oh yeah.
Oh, it's fascinating stuff.
Now they ended up selling all that stuff off. I just anyway, yeah. But no, in the prop room, typically we have all kinds of old, nasty, broken stuff, and typically in a motion picture, you want something to sound a certain way. It says something to you. So typically, we will go with a sound that we call hyper real. There's reality. So if it's a simple walk and talk, we'll probably do a realistic type of Foley and try to match production as much as we can. For anything where there's action or there's heavy backgrounds, anything, it's sea waves crashing, this and that. Every little thing that you do has to be over the top. The question is, how over the top?
Interesting.
It has to be believable, yet big enough to cut through, and that's what I call hyperreal.
Right.
The third area is surreal, which is, of course, something that nobody knows what it sounds like. However, we all know what a lightsaber sounds like now.
Right.
There is nobody, there is still is no such thing as a lightsaber, but there is nobody who could put in a sound for a lightsaber and get away with it that wasn't, you know, that wasn't Walters.
Tell us where it came from.
Or Ben Bird's.
Where it came from.
Yeah.
I know, but.
But see, so now that surreal sound has become realistic.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Jeffrey.
2 questions. First of all, is there a sound that you created that everybody just loved to the point where they just end up recreating it? And the second one is, do you have a specialty on a sound? Are you the footstep guy or anything like that?
I don't think there's really any one sound that anybody has copied. Everybody kind of does their own thing. There is one technique that I pioneered that I'm very happy with, or I was very happy with, and that was pitch shifting, or you know, altering the speed, the pitch. And when you're working with a film-based system, it's very difficult because the projector can only go so slow without burning the film. Okay, so you have a limited range in what you can do in terms of off-speed recording. For instance, you could record it twice at double speed, and then when you play it back, of course, it's at half speed. But then your performers have to perform at double speed, right? Mm-hmm. So these were all, and you know, my engineers came up with ways that they could vary slightly the voltage going to the projector, so they could move the projector up and down just a little bit, you know, but not a lot, and that wasn't enough.
You weren't using carbon arc projectors, were you?
No.
Oh, okay,
the Magnatech, the newer Magnatechs. So it was bulb. But anyway, this guy, one of the reps from Lexicon, came by the stage one day, and I'm moaning and groaning to him about, you know, God, I gotta find some better pitch shifting things. All the available pitch shifters, hardware pitch shifters at the time, could really only go 10 or 15% either way without noticeable glitching. Okay, without any kind of processing artifacts, let's say. So Lexicon made this thing called a 2400, and what it was a broadcast time compression expander to regulate the length of TV shows, or broadcast material, but keep the pitch the same.
Right. So just slow it down, just ever so, like if you're a minute off or whatever, you just speed it up just a little bit.
And I never knew it at the time, but I come to find out that the pitch shift algorithm was done by this guy John DeLorto, who was a physics professor at Stanford, and it was a genius algorithm, and the pitch shifting function of this thing was so insane. I was able to get 100%, in other words, 1 octave up and down, completely clean. This was unheard of. Nobody else had this. Not only that, since it was a stereo unit, I could loop it. I could come out of the left and go into the right, and I could get 200% up and down clean.
That's great.
totally out of sync, mind you.
Right.
So the editors would have to cut it.
Right.
But the girth, this was throughout. Used it on Days of Thunder. Used it on Hunt for Red October. Both Star Trek movies 5 and 6. Used them on both of those. I was able to get massive sounds out of stuff that we couldn't do, you know, in the stage.
Okay, we've got a couple questions I'm going to run through in the Q&A, and then we'll come back to our panel. Michael Jones said, "What? This is a little off from the Foley, but what mic to use to capture sound from a subject speaking 3 to 5 feet away? Like, what would be your go-to mic, your first mic that you would use?"
You talking about dialogue?
I think it's dialogue, yeah, or just someone speaking. You're 3 to 5 feet away. What would be your go-to mic for that?
3 to 5 feet away, you got to use a shotgun. Okay, you got a number of options. Probably one of the least expensive would be that Rode NTG3, which I think is really good for the money. 416 MK, any of the Sennheiser MKH series. Personally, if I had only one microphone that I could have, if I was only allowed one mic, it would be the Sanken CS3.
Oh, interesting.
Because that is a great mic, and it doesn't suffer from the typical problem of the interference tube design. Okay, it's the only one because it actually has 3 elements inside of it. Anyway, yeah. So you'd want a shotgun.
Ash asks, any recommendations on capturing sounds outdoor? What kind of rig would you use?
For outdoor, the important thing is you need a Zeppelin and you need a windjammer. The Zeppelin is the cage that goes around the mic, and the windjammer is the dead cat, the furry. Okay, those are essential. And from there, it depends on what you want it to sound like. Typically, you would use a shotgun. However, if you used a cardioid or, there's a shotgun in the thing there. That's at the hula bowl. Typically, it depends on the kind of sound you want. If you want a more kind of a softer, more atmospheric sound, you might want to put a cardioid in there. You also might want to put an MS mic in if you want to record stereo effects. If you're going to record stereo effects, I would recommend that you don't record XY, you don't record ORTF, you don't record anything else but MS.
And can you explain those, the difference between those?
Okay, XY is where your 2 capsules, your cardioid capsules, that cross in a kind of an X thing. And what happens is when you draw the polar patterns, it makes a very smooth arc across the front. So most of your small recorders, the Zoom, all the Zoom recorders, anything with a built-in mics are typically XY. Okay. Now you're also able to open up that XY a little bit, so it's about 120 degrees instead of 90. Okay, and that makes for a little wider stereo, but it places a hole in the center, and you can hear it. Okay. ORTF is where the mics are pointed outwards, 110 degrees. There's a whole bunch of different miking techniques, but MS mid-side allows you to adjust the width of the stereo image in post. Okay. Also, it allows you to.
And what's the setup for MS?
It's a mid mic, typically either a hypercardioid or a cardioid and a figure 8 on the sides, getting the sides. So it's really still only 2 channels because the figure 8 is mono. But I forget the formula. I'm sure one of you guys knows the formula out
I'll
there.
tell you this.
I
There's
think
an
mid
MS
plus side.
setting.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Mickey, that there was an MS setting in the Mix Pre 6 that Mickey and I came across that was causing all kinds of weird stuff until we turned it off.
Until you turned it off, sure. Yeah,
because it's built for that.
Because it's adding and subtracting signals from each other.
It was bad.
And I'm sure. Oh, there's Jeff. Jeff puts it in there.
Yeah, mid plus side equals left, mid minus side is right.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, you can do the same thing really with an XY thing. You can set it up even without a decoder. You can set it up on your Pro Tools. Just anyway.
Yeah, that's great. Ken Jordan asks, how would you Foley the sound of waves crashing against rocks?
Well, water effects are extremely difficult. 1, because they're messy. 2, because they never sound like what you want them to sound like. I think if I had my silicon, I think it would be better because I could layer a few things, but the waves splashing against the rocks, it's really two things. It's the hit and the splash. So I would probably do a hit of water onto cement or something like that. And then I would do a second track of water into water, the back slash into the water. And I would have the editors cut it.
That's great. Javier says, what's your experience with Foley software where you can perform like a virtual instrument while having great samples or even recording your own beforehand? Have you played with that at all?
I have no idea. I've seen some stuff, and the problem is it's not real. It's, you know, the whole point of Foley is that this is the humanizing of the picture.
Right.
This is the humanizing of the people in the picture. And I mean, maybe for animation it might be okay.
Right.
But yeah, I've seen something where it will actually follow the exact action and create the sounds. But last I heard, it was not something that I could ever use.
And Andy Niedermeyer asks, I hear that footsteps must match left for left and right for right. Can you hear if it's mismatched?
Well, I know guys that only do single foot, and they have a way of changing their style from one to another, and it sounds like left right. The left should always sound just a little different than the right. I don't know why you would want to change it anyway, because the whole part about getting your body in sync with the picture, if you were reversing that, and you were stepping with your right foot when the left foot is,
it'd be hard.
Well, you'd certainly have way more brain power than I would.
There's a certain level of keeping it simple.
A certain level of, yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's possible.
All right, Victor asks, what percentage of Foley is done by real actors, CA's SFX? So I guess would say sound effects. So what percentage of what we hear you think are sound effects versus Foley?
That depends on so many different things. The first thing it probably depends on is the director. There's a lot of directors that don't like Foley. No matter, I don't want to turn that down.
Mm-hmm.
There's depends on budget.
Right.
If they have a big budget, and it depends on really what's in the picture. It's hard to say, but in a well-crafted picture, I think that Foley would, obviously there's a lot more per capita of sound effects, I think, than Foley effects. Right. But I think in a good picture where, they can all be well represented.
I had the opportunity. I used to work in the main house at Lucasfilm or at the ranch, and what was fun was the sound recordists would be outside. Like I remember they were doing a motorcycle, and they were just sitting. I got there early. Of course, I ruined the recording, which was a whole nother problem of showing up at 6:30 when they were like they're there at 6:30 because no one's showing up. Anyway, and but they had this ninja, going around the loop in the ranch, and they're just sitting there just recording it, and just for hours, to get just the right drive by. And I just thought, and then the Foley stage, of course, is right behind the main house, or one of the Foley stages that I worked in a little bit. And I was just like, I just thought it would be the funnest job ever. Just
it is. It was one of the most creative things.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, when I had to leave, I had to kind of reinvent myself into another area because there weren't any post facilities where I moved to.
Oh, right.
So I had to move to production, and and kind of reinvent myself as a production mixer.
Right.
But anyway,
how do you find your way to Steinkjer, Norway?
Actually, I didn't have to look very hard. The plane took me directly here. It was.
Why
it was
are you
quite
in Norway?
convenient.
Why? How did you end up in Norway?
That's my question.
Okay. All right. So I'll skip the middle part of the story because we'll probably get back to it. But after Hawaii, I went with a couple of sound editor buddies that I had, and we went to the Northern Mariana Islands to start a film department at the local college. And that was a huge hit. It had a great time. Had no idea what we were doing, but I like to write. So I wrote all of the syllabi, and I wrote all this stuff, and we got WASC accreditation. So we must have done something right.
Right.
And then saw an ad, or actually we had a Filipino guy who was we had hired to do motion graphics and simple 3D, beginning Maya. And he said, "Oh, you guys got to check this out. They're doing something in the Philippines. They're doing something in the Cebu." I'm like, Cebu? What's that? So we looked at it, and there was this guy who was building a huge studio in Cebu, and two big shooting stages, full post, Foley stage, ADR stage, dubbing stage. Wow. So called him up, and blah, 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 blah. One thing led to another. I went over on a quote unquote 6-month consulting contract, and was there for 6.5 years.
And that's how you met Mickey?
That's how I met Mickey. Mickey was about the same age as I was when I started.
Mm-hmm.
He's probably my brightest student ever. He was my student, and I think that almost right after graduation, the student surpassed the master. He had just a tremendous natural aptitude for everything. It was uncanny. First of all, he could hear it. He could hear it right away. He knew the tech. He was interested in the tech. He knew camera. He knew, and I think that's why you're very, very lucky to have him.
Oh, we know.
Because he's right on, bro. I'm very proud of you.
How did you get to? Yeah, very much.
Okay.
And how did you get from the Philippines to Norway? We have a couple more questions, so I'm gonna pull you in. I'm gonna reel you in a little bit just so we can get through.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I got recruited at LinkedIn recruitment.
Okay, very good.
Some cross connections. They needed somebody in Norway, and
do you like it? Is there a good sound community in Norway?
No, I mean, kind of yes and no. It's not as Horst knows. It's not a huge market.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty small community. It's pretty closed. We tried to get a sound guys Zoom thing like this happening. I think we did like 2 meetings, and it kind of petered out. So and it's a very small community. I'm not in Oslo. I'm halfway up the country.
This is why I'm asking. You are in the middle of nowhere, between the.
I'm in a college farm town.
Oh, that's great. It's great.
So,
but his statue is in every yard in Norway. He just doesn't have his hat on right now.
Yeah, exactly. Chris, and then Jesse.
I was wondering, Greg, as a Foley artist, are there any movies that you have seen that you would say the sound in that movie is perfect? Like things where you say, like, this is your gold standard. This is what you want to try and hit.
Boy, I don't know, Chris. Everything is so bespoke. I think it depends on the genre. I was extremely happy with Sicario, but mostly because of the track, the music track rather.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these Netflix things keep amazing me. with with the way they approach things. Drive, the movie Drive. Do you remember that one? That really impressed me because of the fact that there was a lot of substitution when you substitute another sound for something that you think you would normally hear. Okay, for instance, in the car especially, every time he's in the car, there were no interior car sounds. There were all just various winds and stuff creating an ambience that was similar to a car sound, but it wasn't.
Apocalypse Now, the beginning.
Yeah. But I mean, there's all kinds of great things. Godfather 1. That the scene where Michael goes and kills the guys in the restaurants.
Jesse.
Hey, Greg. Curious about if you're getting any calls to do immersive work and how you would approach that, what your choices might be. And also just a bonus question. Have you ever used your beard as a windjammer when recording?
I'll take the bonus question first for 300, please. The answer is no. No, I haven't. What do you mean immersive?
I mean, if the end product or the delivery is going to be delivered in sort of surround or some sort of immersive format, are you doing any ambisonic recording, or do you get any calls for well, if assuming that it's going to be delivered in that way, would you approach it differently?
Okay, well, it's everything. I think everything in LA that I've done has always been in some surround format. Rarely is surround done in 5 separate tracks. The surrounds are typically derived from the others. It's a much more natural thing, and the last thing, of course, that you want is to pull focus away from the screen. So, any specific things in the surrounds are typically a problem. The way I see it.
Victor asks, what mics are you using mostly? So what are your, let's say, top 3 or top 5 mics?
Okay, for Foley, I tended to use the Neumann KMR 81, the short shotgun. Thank you, Mickey. For dialogue, I like either the Sanken or I like the Sennheiser MKH series. Obviously the Sheps would be great, but Sheps are very limited in terms of where you can use them. You can't, any place that's humid, forget it. Which is why I, ended up going Sennheiser. And other odds and ends, but those are my 2 main brands.
That's great. Through life, did you take special steps to protect your hearing? And has age changed your hearing perception?
Yes.
Vincent.
Yes, Vincent. Yes, and yes. To number 2, I find that, and I'll admit this, I find that I'm pretty far down, starting at about 14K. I played in rock bands, a lot in the 70s. And if you remember then, nothing went through the PA except the vocal. Everything else was amps. The bigger, the better. Yes, I had an SVT. Yes, I had a dual Showman. Were they loud? You bet. But as I went on, when I started working, I started using cigarette filters, quite frankly. And I'd take a cigarette filter and I'd cut it, and I'd either cut it or tear it in half, pull it apart a little bit, just to kill the high end, because the high end is the thing that does the most damage.
Interesting. Victor also asks, how has Atmos changed the business?
Okay, the thing about Atmos is it's fundamentally different than traditional tracks in the fact that the sounds are object-based, similar to games. Okay, so I I think Dolby has done a fantastic job of making that concept switch be easier for, for traditional, I want to say linear, but I mean, you know what I mean, track-based mixing, and be able to do that. I think there's going to be a lot of crossover in the future. Unreal is going to play a big part. Dolby's going to play a big part. And I have to tell you that I have no Atmos theaters anywhere near me, so I actually haven't heard one.
I have to admit it, for me, I thought of it like, oh, it's good to have a little surround or whatever. And I was in a theater that had 170 speakers, and they just started showing examples. And one of them was they took Soundgarden's Black Hole Sun and took all the stems and stuck them, pulled them out. And then the other thing that they did was, just an effects where they really put all the stuff into it all around you. And I literally couldn't go back. Like suddenly my brain had opened up to hearing everything around me. And I'm now there's like this slow evolution of my sound system that keeps on wanting to put more speakers in, because it's just, you just suddenly the airy, of you feeling like you're in it, it's hard to give up. Jesse, you were going to ask a question.
Yeah, just curious if you've ever experimented, since you're a Sanken guy, with the CO100K, that extended frequency range microphone for any sort of sampling.
I haven't, and I'm not really up on a lot of the current stuff, mostly due to cash. I wanted to answer your other thing about ambisonic.
Yeah.
I am experimenting a little bit. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of guys who know much more about it than me, but I'm trying. And I can see a value, because a lot of our kids want to do 3D and VR. So
what do you think of there's a couple of us that talked about the idea of, there's ambisonic. I have the little Sennheiser Ambio mic, but a couple of us have been talking about moving the mics much further apart to accentuate that feeling of, pulling the mics further apart so that you really get a much wider sound. What is your opinion of that?
But keeping the same matrix.
Yeah.
And the same algorithm. I don't know. If you could get the angles right.
Right.
I think that might be key, because it has to do with the way that the polar patterns interconnect, right?
Yeah.
So if you could do that, maybe you could try it on a dummy head or something like that, and see if you could, and see how that works and expand. I mean, it could, but then what happens in the center?
Right. Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, I don't. Is it important? I don't know.
Right.
I like the stuff that I have recorded. A lot of the rains that I've recorded sound fantastic. In ambisonic.
Sky.
I got to hear Life of Pi in Paramount on the soundstage that they mixed it on, and it was like living in a swimming pool of sound. There was no a single point, and to have that live experience happening within a theater setting was pretty awesome. And all the joysticks, the joystick was the control way beyond just 5.1 or 7.1.
Yeah, well, what I really want is holographic sound.
What do you mean by holographic sound?
I mean sound that is just there.
Right.
You would like Atmos, I think. That would get pretty darn close.
Andy Niedermeyer, we're getting to the end here. Years ago, I was at Frank Serafin's studio in LA, and he had a keyboard with different sound samples on each key. Did you ever do something like that?
Frank was one of several of what we call actual sound designers. The term sound designer has been blown up, to a million things, but sound designers were guys that actually created sounds. And Frank was one of the masters of it, John Fasal. And I did have a synclavier system into Paramount for about 2 weeks. It was, one of the early renditions. And it was interesting, but it just didn't work for me.
Yeah.
Did you ever have
So-
to do laugh tracks? I have to ask. Sorry. Were you ever a laugher? I had to ask. Sorry.
No, they have guys for that.
The guys that specialize in laughs, they just give me a.
Yeah, his name is Carol something or other, but he's the guy.
That's just great that there's a guy that
No,
does
he's got.
laughs.
He walks in with a machine, just like you just said, and he's
You're
got
exactly right.
like a keyboard, just like a
You're-
piano.
That's
and
right.
it's loud. I'm sorry, you tell it because I've seen it
Well,
happen.
no, I mean he didn't have that keyboard arrangement at the time. It was some black box with buttons, and the combination of the keys that he pressed
Yeah.
were the layers of the. And I mean, he did it for everybody.
Yeah.
And he had this down to a science.
And you bring him in for 2 hours, and you laugh your show.
And you're done.
Yeah.
And you're done. Every show. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just love the idea that there's just someone who we have to find him. We have to find him and have him like talk about.
No, if he's
creating
still
laughs.
alive, yeah.
Right.
Bob
right,
does
yeah,
guffaws,
absolutely.
Tim does chuckles.
No, big crowds, loud noises, kaha
Yep.
teehees, all those. Yeah, each one has a key.
Greg, thank you so much for joining us for an hour and talking
Totally
about this.
my
It's
pleasure.
Amazing, and it's so great to have you just in the group beforehand and last week. I hope you keep coming back.
I am so happy to be in the group.
No, it's just really a pleasure to have you.
And you guys are bumping me up.
Well, it's as we keep this, I just feel like our group just keeps on getting better, and we keep on bringing more and more people in that just really bring a deep connection to production, and so I just so appreciate you joining us today. Thank you again.
Okay, it's entirely my pleasure. Thank you.
And thanks everyone else. Of course, we can't. I thought the attendees did a great job. The panelists did a great job. Everybody's got their own role. We had lots of good questions. We had good answers and some questions, and it was great. So I got in this morning and setting this up this morning and just going, I can't believe this. Like, this is just such a cool thing. Like, I was getting set up. I was like, I'm about to turn on, I'm about to go live, and there's just gonna be a whole bunch of cool people to show up. I was thinking about it about between 5:55 and 6 o'clock this morning. I'm like, I'm gonna hit this button, and there's gonna be like 60 cool people that show up in like 5 minutes. I was like, where else in my life do I just hit a button and 60 cool people just go boop, instant community that I get to hang out with for 3 hours? And so I just love it. I love hanging out with all of you, and I just really thank everyone for
There's
your
60,
patience.
60 cool people and a few other ones like us.
Now we're at 100. And, we were up to over 200 cool people. I'm just saying in the first 5 minutes it's 60 people, but having 200 people that are just becoming more and more family every day. I love the discussions we see on Discord. I love hanging out with all of you, and it's just such an honor to be with you. So thank you so much. Nikki, go ahead and hit it. So remember that tomorrow we've got Black Magic is actually going to join Chris Summers, and we're going to talk about the 12K. Thursday, the infamous Renee Ritchie is going to be here to answer questions about social media. We're also going to have Oliver Breidenbach talking about Memo Live. On Friday, it's education in the second hour. Saturday, education in the second hour for the teachers who can't make it on Friday because they're working on education. And then Saturday's the long day. And then Sunday, we'll relax and figure out what the heck's going on. And so anyway, we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you so much. All right, take care.